I want to welcome you to this month's episode of the African Liberty Monthly Webinar. I am Akinyemi an editorial assistant at African Liberty. So, Captain, 2 weeks into the coronavirus lockdown, like 2 weeks immediately after the president declared the lockdown in Nigeria, the Nigerian police killed 18 Nigerians within 2 weeks, even though as at then, the coronavirus had killed just 11 people. These are police officers trying to enforce lockdown protocols towards protecting lives against the coronavirus. But within 2 weeks, the police had killed 18 people, while the coronavirus had killed just 11. In Kenya, between March 27 to June 1, the police had recorded 15 official kills from 31 incidents. These statistics are commonplace across the continent. It's like an African pandemic on its own. The African police just can't stop shooting. So, Captain, I want to ask you, do you think police institutions in Africa should be disarmed to protect lives, which ironically they were meant to protect in the first place?
We need first of all to give a background to why police institutions in Africa operate as they are today. And this explanation is purely on the historical understanding of the making of the police institutions in Africa. I think most of the African countries were colonies back in before independence, and therefore the creation of the police institution defined how the institution served then, and later on was taken over by both independent governments, and how it has mutated to date to what we see today. The response to coronavirus by the police is equally out of the appreciation of the complex and unprecedented time that governments in Africa have found themselves in this pandemic.
Dr. Tessa, what do you think about this point of view?
Well, thank you very much for this question and for having me on this panel and for being with the other very esteemed guests here today. Well, I think the historical perspective is essential, and I think it's very crucial to look at the way that policing institutions have been established and the way that they've morphed into what they are now. So I definitely think it's important perspective, but I want to kind of get back to the question that you asked as well about whether we should disarm police forces, and if that's the answer to that's the solution to what's happening now. And I would argue that that's not the solution, because I think we need some kind of overarching body, some kind of institution that will provide safety and security for citizens. So if the police would cease to exist, another institution would emerge, because I think everywhere across the world we see how people need some kind of authority to provide security for themselves, whether this is based from community or whether this is something that's run by the states. So I think disarming police forces entirely is a different thing. However, now what you see in the US, the whole discussion of defunding the police, I mean, this is, of course, an interesting discussion. So what is the term of resources? Should we allocate resources to the further militarization of the police, or should we allocate resources to more community-based initiatives to somehow enhance the relationship between police officers and citizens? So I think the question is not necessarily should we disarm the police or completely dismantle them as an institution. I think it's more about how should we allocate resources and efforts in order to somehow improve relationships between police officers and citizens so that we see less kind of forms of police brutality.
Thank you very much, Tessa. Very strong points there. And of course, I find that very insightful. And that leads to my question that I'm going to be posing ahead to Mr. Segun Awosanya. And I believe that in order to really understand police brutality in Africa, we need to dissect it from the root cause. And typically, there's been clamored, right, that one of the major catalysts for police brutality is how the African police in Nigeria, in Africa, they are being, paid in terms of remuneration, in terms of treatment, in terms of how, their accommodation, their feeding, the kind of treatment that they get in the society. Right, but then my question would then be that do you think that the argument is based on a benefit perspective, Or do you think that, can we justify police brutality on a perspective of remuneration and funding? What do you think?
But if I were to start from the root cause, I would say start from legislation. And what do I mean by legislation? The act that actually set up our police is still the Constabulary Act of the colonial era, which tends to create a force that protects the 1% from the 99%. And so with that, the police in Africa generally sees themselves as a force rather than as a service, which they meant to be. So the Nigerian police in particular do not see themselves as a friend of the people, even though they pose as a friend of the people. They are not engaging in society, even though there's a wide gap between the society and the closest authority to them, which is the police. So when you are looking at the gap between the people and the police, it leaves room for what is called perception. And what do I mean by perception? Every police officer sees every citizen as a mincemeat, as somebody as mincemeat, as somebody they need to oppress and to extract something from. They don't see them as people they need to serve, they are accountable to, or the people that they need to protect. Rather, they look at them as people that they can infringe upon their rights and they can do as they please. And this is not because the police are just vermins or they are just criminals or so. If you fire all the police in Nigeria today, I don't think anything will change, because we're dealing with a systemic issue. And it is the same thing in America. Fire the entire police system and bring in another set of police officers, the same thing will happen. But until we tell ourselves the truth that we are engaging culture, and in order to engage culture, you need to understand what is. And while understanding what is, you need to understand that community policing, in other words, having police engage the people beyond criminal prosecution. For example, every time we see a police officer in our community in Nigeria, they are trying to solve a case and they are seeing everybody as a suspect, giving rise to the abuse of the rights of everybody else because they operate outside the law themselves. And this is because they are victims of the society, of the system itself. The police does not have operational independence. The politicians control their affairs. The police does not have the same. They approved a budget and what was actually given in piecemeal. So there are so many issues that buffet our Nigerian police, and until they are reformed and the laws that set them up is repealed and replaced, we cannot have the kind of police that is representational of the society.
Thank you very much. Really interesting submissions there. And I would like to take this to Kwoh Elonge, our colleague from Cameroon. What do you share? Do you share this perspective of Mr. Segun Awosanya? Do you think that it is a systemic problem? And how do you think about the police brutality issue in Cameroon?
Saying what Segun was saying, that I was supporting what he said. I said it is no secret that the police is a reflection of the colonial history, but also that they operate within a political and social economic context within the society now. That it's much more it's secondary to providing public need that is there to serve the political system. And so to address issues of police brutality, you have to also address the underlying problems within the political, social, and economic system.
The Nigerian police has its uniqueness in terms of exploiting and seeing citizens as a means of extortion. Does this? I would just wonder, does this happen in your country, Wanjiru? And what are your thoughts about this?
I don't think the Nigerian police force is unique. I think it's a worldwide problem. We've seen it in the US, we've seen it in South Africa, we've seen it in Cameroon. So I really do not think they are unique. And when it comes to exploiting, it still goes back to systematic oppression that was there with the police force that was in place when, let's say, post-independence. And the police force that was there was essentially put there for the sake of protecting the elites, who are then the white. And when our forefathers took over, they did little to nothing to actually help change the police force as it was. So in as much as they are still exploiting, that is what the police force was enacted for in the beginning, and it has not been changed. So I think what is needed at this point is a complete overhaul in terms of our policing. And not only in Nigeria, not only in Kenya, not only in Cameroon, but worldwide. As one of the colleagues has said, we don't need to change police officers, but I think we need to systematically change the mindset and what we know police to be on issues like community policing, and also find a way to bring police closer to the community and the community to trust the police, because I don't think either trusts the other. Because even when you look at the issue of exploiting, they don't only just exploit us in terms of violence. Like in Kenya, you'll find that they're the same people forming gangs. You find that most of the gangs, when they have the guns and they have police uniform, most of them are given the same things by the police. The same police who will still come and brutalize the whole community because there's an apparent gang in the same community.
Let me come to Captain Augustine. So, I mean, you're a captain, and I understand that you have an experience in the inside of, the inside experience in policing. So, I mean, do you subscribe to community policing? Wanjiru said something about, systematically changing the citizens' mind with regards to community policing. Do you subscribe to this idea, Captain Augustine?
Yeah, thank you very much so much for that question. Yes, I subscribe to that position because I believe that the best form of policing is that for the form of policing that places communities at the center of policing affairs, and appreciates that communities are the first layer of security, and that when communities are working closely with the police and the level of confidence and trust is very high, then we build into the national security of the country. And where communities are able to volunteer in information about crime in their neighborhoods, where communities are able to go to the police stations rather than stay away from them, that is the beginning of solving policing challenges in Africa. And I'll use the example of Kenya. I think Wanjiru will bear with me. The fact that we've really come a long way as a country in gravitating away from colonial form of policing that was, around protecting the elite and the state, but towards working, to put frameworks and policies that inspire community participation in local security as a small subset of national security. So we are, if you take a look at the constitutional changes that occurred in Kenya, right from when there was pressure for multipartyism up to the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, which heralded devolved governance today, there has been a big and tremendous change in terms of how government sees communities and how communities also participate in national affairs. Much of the policies and laws and frameworks have not necessarily been implemented. I will cite the example of community policing authorities, community policing forums. These are all provided in law in Kenya, but operationalizing them and making them make sense to produce service delivery in the form of security for the people is still a long way to go. But I think compared to the rest of the countries in Africa, I would say that Kenya is headed towards community-centered policing, but the challenge remains what we've been discussing about: systemic, historical, and cultural issues in the manner in which police institutions are managed, not only in Kenya but in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain. I like the fact that you mentioned systemic reforms. Let me go back to, I would like to lean towards what Mr. Segun said at the time, that Nigerian policing is unique. And let me read this. The United Nations recommends that we should have one police for every 450 citizens. That is the standard. Kenya has one police for every 1,150 citizens. Tanzania has one for every 1,298. Ghana has one for every 1,200. Ironically, in Nigeria, we have one police to 400 people. That means we are above the United Nations average. But the problems that we are facing in Nigeria are still the same problems that countries like Kenya and Uganda are facing, and Tanzania. It seems the problem is about living and giving power, because most of the police officers in Nigeria are found protecting politicians, the rich and influential, and these politicians are not willing to give up that power that protects them. When you see a politician in Nigeria, you see them moving in an entourage of about 20 cars filled with policemen that should be protecting people. So that means we're also suffering a deficit, and this scenario is replicated across the continent. So I want to ask Mr. Segun once again. Do you think that the rich and mighty in Nigeria are willing to give away that power, that influence that they have over police in Nigeria or in Africa, to embrace a community focused approach towards policing?
Well, to be honest, I know very little about the Nigerian situation, so I can't speak on the specifics of that. But I do think that this is definitely a problem that you see elsewhere. But you see this as well beyond the African continent, right? The idea of the police serving the political elite and serving the wealthy is not only it's not necessarily an African problem, I would say. But you see this even in parts of Europe, Turkey. I was recently also at a webinar where you saw a lot of this in India and Pakistan as well. So I think this is something, it's kind of the politicization of the police is definitely a problem that we can identify elsewhere. And it's also to kind of link up to what was said earlier, I think, and this also makes it very problematic to implement community policing in a very efficient way. I mean, the idea of community policing is extremely attractive, and if it plays out well, it can be a very fundamental instrument to enhancing relationship between police officers and citizens and getting citizens involved in policing. But as long as policing is kind of state-led, state-implemented, and a way to kind of, as long as policing occurs in that way, community policing is sometimes used as kind of a surveillance tool, right? To control individuals rather than to actually engage with them in constructive solutions to increasing security, increasing, society safety in their communities. So I think the idea of community policing is a very good solution, but I think a lot of countries are also showing that much more needs to be done about the way that the police actually serves and who they serve before we can actually even think about implementing community policing.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I would like to ask Wanjiru. Wanjiru, what do you think about this particular situation where the police are serving the mighty and powerful rather than serving the country or the community as a whole?
Colleagues have said it's not a unique issue, although there's something I've noticed. You've talked about political elites having entourage of 20 cars of police officers. I don't think that is the case in Kenya. Apart from the president, maybe my other colleague from Kenya can counter me on this if I'm wrong. Apart from the president and sometimes the deputy, you will not find even the governors or the ministers. We call them cabinet secretaries here with police officers. I also did not see the same in Rwanda. I've not seen the same in Tanzania. I only saw it in Burundi. They always have entourage of policemen and army following. So I think that one is unique, maybe to Nigeria and a few other countries alone. But when it comes to them serving the elite, it still goes back to the historical. Why was the police force introduced? Like, what was the sole purpose of having policemen? How they started the military to protect countries from outside intervention. They started police to protect themselves from their subjects, because back then they were the kings and the subjects. So it's still the same thing. We just need a complete overhaul of what we know policing to be.
I think that the situation of policing and police brutality, as mentioned by Segun Awosanya some time ago, and then a number of people have also alluded, you would understand that it takes more than just community policing. And there's also the legal standpoint. There is the policy standpoint, right? So what are we supposed to do? What do we need to get right in terms of policies at the higher level, perhaps in terms of legislation, to ensure that, of course, we can effectively curb police brutality in Africa?
I think that I'll use Cameroon because Cameroon is a bit different from. It's a bit it's similar. It reflects a lot. It's African in nature, but it's different in the way it came to be a nation. Cameroon, for example, it's a bijurate system. It has two legal systems. It has a common law system. Remember, these were two countries that came together. So it has a common law system and a civil law system. Now, what happens is that the civil law system governed French Cameroon, while the common law system governed English Cameroon. The government decided that it was important to harmonize these two systems in 2007. So that because the English legal system, for example, had the presumption of innocence, while with the civil law system, you could be locked up and you had to prove yourself innocent. So they came to harmonize these to try to see how they could effectively police communities and police the society. However, the problem has been that the civil law system, because the majority of Cameroon's population, the civil law system limits the way justice and police work is being done. And the problem is further compounded by the fact that legislation there is difficulty in getting criminal liability for police officers or police brutality. For there to be criminal liability, there has to be, first of all, policies that have to policies that will check police use of force. You also need the judicial system that's independent, which is something that is still lacking in Cameroon. The judicial system and the police systems are just so interwoven that it's difficult to get justice. There's also the fact that police usually act from instructions by the government. That is serving states, it is serving state interests. So it is difficult to try to get accountability. It's assumed that the police acting, however brutal or high-handed, that is serving government's interests. It will be interesting for you to that the Minister of Justice has disciplinary powers in Cameroon as to whether a police officer should be even examined in court, if they establish that he was in government issues. So it's an issue in Cameroon, particularly because the entire system is flawed.
Interesting. It's interesting learning about how it works in Cameroon, really, because this is my first time, interacting with you, and then this is very insightful for me. So that I can connect the dots, right? I know that there's been a campaign that has been really successful in Nigeria. The journey is still far, like the battle is still far from being over. But then it has been a massive fight on social media, a huge campaign across social media, even on site. And I am aware that they face challenges trying to ensure that they are executing on all of this. I'm not sure if Mr. Segun is backing, but then I would like him to.
I'm here.
Oh, okay, awesome. So I would like him to share lessons, because of course we understand that the NSAS campaign was greeted with mixed attitudes. Of course, of positive and of course on the negative side. But then typically, what are the lessons and how can we connect that to solving the police brutality issue from not from the community policing perspective now, but from a legislative perspective, from a legal perspective now? Thank you, Mr. Segun.
While we're doing this, you need to find out that common ground, what connects us together as a people, what we can actually agree on. When you look at everybody around in Nigeria, in Cameroon, in everywhere, there is always something that we believe in that other people don't believe in. And because of that, we probably will not agree on the color of the skies together. So which is why the conscious revolution paradigm is necessary, to be able to say, what exactly is that common ground that we all have as a people? For us, we design something called the future of our children model. So we believe that in Africa, our politicians always squeeze in or smuggle in their children into public offices. Every parent who is going out and coming back late at night, they're working because they don't want their children to suffer. Because of that, we know that also that have to do with children, because there's no amount of hardship. People will always want a situation where they provide for their children. So when we begin to now when we start tinkering with the idea of creating a movement that works towards guaranteeing the future of our children and leaving behind a legacy for them. And when you begin to ask the question, pose a question to an average Nigerian, that would you want to leave this kind of Nigeria, this kind of state of police brutality and the rest and impunity, and hand it over to your children the way your parents have handed it over to you since 70 years of the policing in Nigeria? Of course, the answer is no. Nobody wants to leave a terrible legacy for their children. And because of that, they will want to give it whatever it takes to ensure that children don't inherit this. Now with that, you have gotten the attention of the people, regardless of their gender, regardless of their tribe, regardless of where their religion, their sexual preferences or the rest. They know that this is a scourge that affects. They will not ask you what your religion is, your sexual preferences before they abuse your rights. And because of that, people feel that it is their responsibility to contribute to this. And how did we start? We started with, if you see something, say something. Over the years before 2017, when police brutality started, and when police brutality was at its peak, nobody feels the responsibility to report crimes of policing, to police, to anybody. Because who do you report to when a policeman robs you at gunpoint at the ATM machine? Will you go to the same police who would naturally defend themselves, because corruption is peer-induced and peer-reinforced within the system. They treat themselves like a cult. So with that, we felt if they know that they can report this and no mortal retribution will be meted against them, then there will be more people who will be bold enough to report. And also, if they find that justice is served and it is seen to be served within 48 hours, more will be encouraged. And that is as a stopgap. When we started, there was a problem with the police admitting that they are actually doing wrong. They kept saying it is perfect, it is okay, they are doing well and all, because we have a lot of silos who are no longer being managed. So they are alone to themselves, abusing the rights of the people. What we call SWAT abroad, we have them in Nigeria, but they don't operate as SWAT, as special weapon and warfare tactics. They operate as rogues, as touts, as criminals on the street who just stay on the road and grab anybody they want to grab and extort them. So over time, we started engaging them. We started arresting them. We started reporting them. We started getting them to disciplinary council and getting them jailed for armed robbery and murder. While we're doing this as a stopgap, we also went to the legislature to engage them about how we can make our law reflect society by repealing and replacing the Police Act. And, we started with the Police Act of a new Police Act, Police Reform Bill, and also a Police Trust Fund Bill. Now, with the Trust Fund Bill, we're able to ease the operational independence of the police so that we won't be waiting for budget all over budget. We will have a fund that actually finances the operation of the police, independent of the politicians. And then also with that, we can guarantee their salaries, their pension, and also begin to educate them properly, engage them in trainings, and also take care of their family. So it was a holistic thing. We also went to the judiciary for them to domesticate the Administration of Criminal Justice Act of 2015 in Nigeria, where policemen are now being guided by new rules that reflect society, so that they won't be arresting somebody in place of another. They won't be the judge, jury, and executioner on the street, and so many other things. So a lot of things were put in place by the judiciary, by the executive, who gave us the support to say, look, once the bill is out, we will sign it into law. And true to their words, the moment the Police Trust Fund Bill came out, it was signed into law, even though we had a year lag before they were able to incorporate the board, which we are still dealing with as we speak. So also the Police Reform Bill, we are the legislature dealing with the technicalities there. And also what we are trying to tell the world with this is that our model actually does not look at policing as the problem of one individual or a few bad eggs in the system. We look at it as a culture of impunity, which you see abroad as well. So if the people who are the 13% abroad, for example, in America, for example, or black community who are being oppressed, all they can do is to ensure that the right people at the legislature, the right people are the right mayors, and the right people who have the political power and political will to do something about it are properly engaged. So once the policy has been fixed, it becomes easier for you to put something in place on ground without anybody repealing it overnight.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Sega. I really buy the idea, and makes a lot of sense. In fact, there's a question from the audience for you, but I'll get back to you when I need to get to Tessa first. Tessa, I mean, you're an academic, and I understand you published a couple of papers on policing in South Africa and in Kenya. So, I mean, a lot of people will argue that, there's a lot of problem. Of course, there's problem with policing in Africa, with the police system in Africa, and they feel that community policing will solve this problem. However, in South Africa, reports say that over the last decade, I mean, over 10 years now, community policing has been established in South Africa. And here we are. Things are still the way they are. I mean, what do you have to say to this? Is community policing, I mean, is it the panacea? How much of a panacea is it?
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for asking this question about community policing. Well, I mentioned something about it earlier as well, but I do think that, I mean, it's always a difficult question to ask, why did something not work, right? Or to even say that something isn't working. How do we measure this? How do we see this? I mean, there are probably defendants of community policing who say that it's working very well in South Africa or in Kenya. What you see in South Africa, for example, is that these community policing forums are organized at police stations. They're run and managed by police officers. And therefore, they very often, in particular neighborhoods especially, lack the will and the kind of engagement of the community. And very often, if they do, they become highly kind of co-opted by political agendas, and they become basically politicized units. And some of the various initiatives we've seen in Kenya, ranging from kind of new Makumi to more community policing initiatives really enforced by the National Police Service, you also see that a lot of times these have been more state-driven. So I did some research about some community policing initiatives in Nairobi, and a colleague of mine in Mombasa, and we saw that a lot of these initiatives were state-led and very often did not work together with existing forms of community policing that have been existing for much longer. And so you see kind of a parallel system happening. So basically kind of a plethora of different initiatives that are all kind of operating under the guise of community policing, but some are state-led, some are community-led, and there's very little interaction between the two. And particularly New Makumbi, which my dear esteemed Kenyan colleagues could say much more about, but from some of the research that we did as well, New Makumbi was very much seen as kind of a way of the state, as a surveillance tool for the state to kind of collect information, etc. And of course, in other parts, it's been praised as a very useful way for engagement between the community and the police. So also, maybe to end off with that, how community policing initiatives unfold is also very divergent according to different neighborhoods or different cities, and it all really depends also on the police officers involved and the way that the community responds and kind of interacts with these initiatives.
Thanks for the contribution, Tessa. Mr. Segun, let me come to you. From the audience, there's a question. I mean, you earlier on you mentioned how your organization, SIA, has done a lot, how much it has done in trying to make sure that there's a legislative framework. Since the problem is fundamental, why not just go down to the foundation and go set things? At the same time, how much do we need to do on the citizens? I mean, aside from the legal framework of things.
There's a responsibility of everyone. Governance is not about the government alone or the structures or the framework that you put in place. It's actually the understanding of what is applicable and how to, demand for accountability from those who are actually meant to serve you. Now, policing in a democratic system is not the same thing as policing under a military junta. Under a military junta, you have people who are actually trying to keep you at bay from revolting against the government. But under a democracy, you have people who are supposed to work with you to ensure that you have a civilization, because the baseline or the basics of civilization is law and order and taxation. I will not pay my taxes if I don't feel safe. I will not pay my taxes if people who are meant to keep me safe are operating within the law. You cannot operate the law illegally. You cannot enforce the law illegally. You have to, you have to be law abiding to be able to prove that that uniform you are wearing is worthy of commendation and is worthy of respect. We must not fear our police officers, but regard them. So when you begin to equip the youth about their right to let them know that these people out there, they are not your bosses, they are actually public servants who are there for your care. So with that, when they begin to act outside the law, just like someone once told me, a friend who works in the bank, he said, look, excuse me, there are many counterfeits out there. If you want to spend the rest of your life engaging your staffers in identifying fake notes, you will not exhaust the fake archetypes that you have out there. But if you focus their attention on studying the original, when they see a fake a mile off, they will recognize it. And that's exactly what we're doing with our own citizens in Nigeria. We're trying to let them understand that the moment a police officer demands for your phone, he has already crossed the line. You know that he's a rogue officer. And they don't struggle with a man with a gun. Continue to engage and be gathering your evidence. It's either you wear a watch or you wear a spy cam, with a biro, a pen or something. Just start recording, get all the facts, and whatever it is he demands from you, always ask the question, am I under arrest? In other words, police have the right to arrest you if on probable cause and based on probably an ongoing investigation if there's a warrant involved. But if they are standing on the road and indiscriminately getting people and alleging that they have committed a crime or so, you know that this is operation outside the law, beyond the standard operating procedure. So the moment you know this, you have started gathering evidence, knowing fully well that no matter how much they take from you, provided you are not bodily harmed, we can get these people within 48 hours or 24 hours, and then you will get your money back and they will be brought to book, provided you are ready to give to serve as a witness and to give an account of your encounter with them. And that has been happening for years now. So for the first time in Nigeria's history, in 2017, after over 70 years of oppression under the police, we're able to hold our police at bay to the point where we are policing the police. And with this also, it's not just a stopgap for us. In the new Police Reform Act, or Police Reform Bill that is about to be passed, there is also a provision for police to be held accountable by members of the civil society. So it's not just governments now, but it's government with the people. So we're using intelligence-led policing and also as community policing principles to drive this. And already that culture is gaining ground. Police now know that if they commit a crime or act outside the operational procedure, they will be arrested. There's no debating about it. And we use social media as a vehicle, which is very easy. It is where the youth are. 70% of Nigerian population are youth. And because of this, that is where they are. That's their entertainment field. That's where they express themselves. And that's where they also get help when they need it. A single tweet can actually get you free. So you don't even have to have my phone number or the organization's phone number. Even though we also have, while we're doing this, we're not creating a separate entity from the police. We're not campaigning for our police to be defunded. We're not campaigning for our police to be overhauled. We're saying that we should engage the police, knowing fully well that they are victims of the system itself. So with that, we should engage them in the point of their need, enough to say that even the things they can't fight for because they take orders and they are also in a regimented environment. If there are issues we see that is affecting them and their operations towards their service to us, we will complain about it and stand for them and make sure those things are solved. And with this win-win situation, police don't see us as an enemy. Activists of the past, they always demonize people, blow stuff out of proportion, use political means to show themselves as, to mob themselves into the heart of the people as an alternative to the present government. We didn't do that with our own advocacy. And we are not activists, we are advocates, because there are two different issues being dealt with here. Activists are those you see on TV burning tires and all. They only have to express their emotions and all. While advocates are people who look at policies, who look at what should be done, who look at the extant laws, who also attend meetings where policies are drafted so that we don't make the same mistake all over again. But we are combining the forces of activism and advocacy to ensure that we have all the gaps covered. Because what we're dealing with globally now, there are institutional gaps. If you're going to put it under one heading, whether you're talking about Cameroon or so. But other countries are very lucky, concerned as against Nigeria. We have the worst police in the world for the second year running. And because we have breached every single treaty that we have signed globally. Our Firearms Act has been breached. Our Police Act of even the antiquated Police Act of 1943 has been breached. Human rights proceedings are no longer followed. So many other things have been breached. So with this, we had a lot of work to do and also a lot of examples to show the world for for the way we engage our system, because in Nigeria, people who protest, unarmed people who protest get shot. So you can tell you how the level of human rights breach that we have in this country. So for the past 4 years that we've been dealing with this, we've not had any issue of people losing their lives in the course of the campaign, and we have been engaging in a civil manner across board. And that way, we're showing an example, leadership example, that you can actually bring about change, even in a nation that doesn't have strong institutions like America.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sega. Picking it from where you've mentioned, you've touched on education, educating the people. You've talked about police violating rights and treaties. I think I would like to hear the perspective of Captain. Captain, you're a senior security advisor in Kenya. I have seen tapes, and I'm sure a lot of other people have seen tapes of police using archaic torture measures to get people arrested and to even get confessions from them. In Nigeria here, police arrest people and they cram them into cells, put them under inhumane conditions, and basically there is no regard for human life and sanctity. This is going to take, aside the necessary institutional reform, this is going to take a lot of re-educating and reorientating on the part of the individual police officer before they get to understand that getting confessions from suspects does not necessarily involve burning them with iron or beating them with sticks or hitting them with guns. So, Captain, what do you think about this education gap on the part of the police?
Yeah, thank you. I want to say that is the sad reality of police institutions across Africa. And the key thing is how police officers join the service and how they are actually socialized into service and how they take up the culture and bad practices that involve use of heinous methods to actually deliver on their day-to-day responsibilities, including collecting evidence through violent interrogation and several other unlawful methods. I think this is about really the systems and the nature of the institutions. But then, using our example as a country, we have really made strides with the creation of some oversight policing entities. Like my colleague will know of the Independent Policing Authority and some mechanism within the police service that actually has the role to investigate police officers who are capable of malpractice in the course of duty. And there are many cases in record where police officers have actually been brought before court, and the court passes sentences indicating that the police officers were involved in excesses. Therefore, the focus, as I would think, would be how really to re-engineer and overhaul the doctrines that have been picked by the police systems since the colonial times to those that actually inspire respect for human rights, respect for liberties, provision of security for all, and a focus on service delivery to the people rather than to a few elites. Therefore, how the police are recruited, and Wanjiru and probably Tessa will know this, in the Kenyan context, even the recent constitutional changes included getting to vet, police officers are fresh through the establishment of the National Police Service Commission to be able to weed errant and corrupt officers in the system.
There's a question from the audience about, we know that our police is bad and the police officers are perpetrating, a lot of injustice to citizens. What are the mechanisms? What do you think citizens should do, when they are being affected by the police, families of those that were discriminated against, that were victims of the police, what do you think they should do to get justice? In 2 minutes, in 1 minute, sorry, please.
I'm not sure about other countries, but in Kenya we have the police oversight. It's called IPOA, that my colleague has just mentioned, where you can take your case to, they investigate and they take the police to the judiciary. And most of the times, especially when a case is taken to IPOA, justice is always served. But there's also the issues where people can advocate. For instance, there's one of the colleagues who's talked about advocating for issues to be done in terms of policies and all those other issues. In case maybe a country doesn't have an institution like the police oversight, they could maybe advocate to have such. Also, if we stop these cute Twitter hashtags and actually hit the streets, I think it would go a long way in terms of how much justice we would get to people who suffer or who get brutalized by the police. So advocacy, 1, 2, having institutions where you can trust and go to when you're brutalized by the police, and 3, let's stop hashtags and maybe hit the streets and demand our rights and liberties. Yeah.
Thanks to everyone that joined in, all our guests today, Mr. Segun Awosanya, Mr. Diphoorn, Kwoh Elonge, Captain Augustine, Wanjiru. Amazing. The conversations have been very interesting, and then of course